Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. As you can see, I have developed a new payroll application. SirPay is able to provide all the relevant information needed to manage an employee's attendance, leave, and finally calculate the employee's salary. You are able to view each individual employee's performance for the month and a detailed breakup of his attendance for the given month. Since payroll systems vary from country to country, I try to make this application as generic as possible to cater to everyone. And there's a lot to cover in this application as it's fairly big. So let's get started. When you open SirPay for the first time, you would first need to set up an administrative username and password. The administrator has access to all the files and sheets of the workbook. So let's start with the username. I'm going to call that company ABC. The next step would be to set up the times the employee clocks in and clocks out of work. So just to show you how this works, I'm going to first thing I would like to tell is there is a standard working hours. So between 7 a.m. and 5 p.m. it's 10 hours, and there is a standard working hours of 5 hours for a half day. So I'm going to change this to 7:30 and 5:30 and click OK. You can now log into the system. Okay, so this would be the home screen of the entire workbook. You have access to all the sheets. The administrator would have access to all the sheets, and he would be able to modify the times and user details. So let's start off with the employee modification sheet, where this sheet is where you would be adding your employees to the database. You would probably remember this sheet from one of the previous videos I made, which managed an employee database and the employee's leave. I would recommend you to pause the video here and watch the other video first to get an idea of how the system works. I will leave a link to the video on the top right hand corner and maybe in the description. There are essentially two differences in this modification sheet. One difference is the addition of this off day column. So that is basically if, for example, your company works 7 days a week, there may be employees having off days on different days of that week. So you would need to follow this step by writing the first 3 letters of the week to enter the off day. And you would probably see how this affects the calculations in the summary sheets. I will show you that towards the end of the video. The second additional information is the addition of new fields. So if you recall, in my previous video I had columns such as tax, CSR, which I added to as extra columns. Do not add these columns to this sheet, as tax and CSR etc. are percentages and calculations of the basic salaries and of the net salary. So do not use those columns here. You can add those columns in the summary sheet over here. I will show you how to do that towards the end of the video as well. So ensure this column is something fixed. So for example, fuel allowance or some sort of fixed additional allowance. So I will add fuel allowance to this fuel allowance and just create a new field. Okay. So we have a new column for fuel. I'm going to fast forward to this section to add employees and some leave to the employees, since I have demonstrated this in the previous video. So let me do that first. Okay, so now that that's done, we can now move to the attendance records sheet actually attendance records workbook to add employees attendance. We can use the administrative username and login to log into the system. Okay, so this workbook essentially has attendance input, the overtime input, any overtime adjustments you would like to make, and corrections you would like to make, which is on the green colored cells. The reddish pink color cell is basically the data which we entered can be viewed in these pink color sheets over down here, and holidays for the year. So let's start with the holidays. There are two ways in which you can we can add holidays into the system, or remove all of the holidays and deduct and re-add them once again. So I'm going to add some holidays which I have here. Okay, and then we can clear this. Now that we have some holidays, we can go to the attendance input sheet. So in this sheet, you would essentially add the attendance of the employees. You will generate a serial number here, which is unique for every entry made. The employee ID is what you use to use for reference purpose, and the date, time in of the time the employee clocks in, the time the employee clocks out, and the day type. The day type is essentially you need to describe if it's a full day or half day. A half day is of two types. There is a morning session and the evening session. So the references are over here. A full day would look at the entry as 7:30 to 5:30 p.m. Half day would be 7:30 to 12:30. And the second session of the half day would be from 12:30 to 5:30. So I have some data here. Let me first add that in. You start off with the employee IDs and you retrieve the data. So it would generate the serial number, unique serial ID for each entry. And then you add the times the employee clocks in and clocks out of work, along with the day type. So I have included a half day and a half day second session just to show you what would happen. You would also notice I have used different time in and time out of each entry, so you would see how it would affect the overall summary of an individual employee. So let's add that in. And the last entered serial number would be 54. You can clear the sheet and you can view the employee attendance in this ATT sheet at the bottom here. So now let's go back to the survey sheet and click on the employee summary sheet down here. So I added employee data for the month of August, as you can see from here. This is for the month of August. So go back to the employee summary sheet and let's add the employee ID 2, which is what I extracted details for. Once we select retrieve, you would see the pattern of attendance of the individual employee. So let's first describe the colors. The first color I'd like to talk about is the blue color, which is the employee's off day, Sunday. So that would be in blue color. The next color would be the yellow color, which is a holiday. So this employee has come into work on a holiday and worked from 7:30 to 5:30. The last color I'd like to talk about is the orange color. The orange color essentially means that the employee has not come to work on a working day and action needs to be taken. So either leave should be deducted or no pay or some sort of, or you could even leave it blank and it would not affect the overall summary. So a few pointers. If an employee comes early to work as shown here, when his clock-in time is supposed to be 7:30, it would not affect the overall system. It would show as if he has come into work at 7:30 and left work at 5:30. So a similar situation where he comes into work early and leaves 5 minutes late, it would come in as extra hours. To claim these extra hours, you would need to claim the overtime. I'll show you how to do that in the next section. So similarly, if he comes in at 7 a.m. and leaves at 6 p.m., he only gets half an hour's worth of extra hours. For the case of a holiday, I kept this system as generic as possible. So in my country, when you work on a holiday or on an off day, the period of which the employee works, say his time in to time out, would be considered overtime. So from 7:35 to 5:30 p.m. would be overtime for this employee. So he has come in a little late to work and left at his normal time, and that is 9.9 hours of extra hours for him. I will show you how to claim this, and then you would see how it would affect the overall system. So let's, for example, claim overtime for the 9th and the 11th, just to show you how it would affect. So let's go back to the attendance record sheet and to the attendance sheet here. So let's look at the entries for the 9th and 11th. So for the 9th, the employee serial number would be 5 and 7. So let's copy those two serial numbers over here. Go to the OT input and add the serial numbers down here and retrieve the data. Once you retrieve the data, this is extracting the information from the attendance sheet worksheet down here. So if these details are correct, we can append the data and claim overtime for this entry. So let's do that. So now we have overtime input into the system, and we can clear the sheet. We can go back to SERP and see how this has affected the overall attendance. So now that we have claimed overtime, you would notice I have two overtime set up here. The first overtime is to claim for overtime of working extra hours. The second overtime is to claim for working overtime on a holiday. You notice these are separate because I didn't want to mix the two overtimes. If you were to make changes to these overtimes, basically if you were to assume that his holiday is not considered overtime, working on a holiday, you could go to the adjustment sheet down here. So let's copy back the adjustments, retrieve the data, and let's say, okay, I would need to explain the OT type. So basically the two OT types are for the after hours and the holidays. Let's just adjust the holiday overtime for now. So I'm going to remove that and bring this up. Yeah. Let's just say I'm going to adjust the overtime of the holiday. So you could do that, and let's adjust it by -9, and let's append that into the sheet. If you go back to and retrieve the data, the overtime deducts by 9, and he is only given overtime per 0.092. So you could do those adjustments for the overtime. One more thing, since I would like to mention that once I claimed overtime, the OT approved row has changed to 1 from 0. It was 0 originally, and once you claim overtime, it turns to 1. Another thing I would like to talk about is for half days, even if there is overtime, it won't happen because he's only completed half day of the work. So overtime cannot be claimed for half days. And basically his working hours would be from 7:30 to 12:30. But if he does work on a holiday, it would be considered overtime, and it would show as extra hours, which would need to be claimed. We can also do some corrections. So we can go back to the attendance record sheet and go to the correction sheet. So let's say we want to correct, let's say you want to change this from a half day to a full day. So let's copy this serial number, go back to the corrections input sheet, insert the serial number here, retrieve the data. Corrections can only be made on the red columns, so this is the original data and this would be the corrected data. So you can change this to a full day and change the timing, say, to 7:35 a.m. You cannot approve the OT. The OT can only be approved through the OT input sheet. So even if I try to add the OT, please use the OT to add overtime. So you cannot do that. So you can only change the times, the dates, and the day types. So let's change the day. Open the data, clear the sheet, go back to my survey workbook and retrieve the data. So you can see, I can't remember which, I think it was the 23rd. Yeah, so this has changed to 7:35 a.m. and back to 5:25 p.m. as if he came to work on a normal day. Another thing I would like to show is this also shows if an employee is coming late to work. So he has come by 0.08 and he has left early from work. So for instance, in this instance he came late by 5 minutes and he has left early from work. So he has not completed his required hours essentially. The last three rows here are the leave deducted. As I showed you in my first in the beginning of the video, I deducted leave on these 2 days, and I deducted no pay on the 5th on a Monday. One final thing I'd like to talk about is how to retrieve data once it's entered. So in order to do that, let's go back to the attendance record workbook and select the ATT sheet. You would notice there is a section in this sheet called the data retrieval section. This portion is used to retrieve the data which has been entered in the ATT sheet. So let's, for example, let's assume we want to find out the attendance from the 1st of August to the 15th of August and retrieve the data. So this is the entire data from between the 1st all the way to the 15th. Let's assume we want to look at a particular employee's attendance. Let's put the number 3, for example, and click retrieve data. We can retrieve the data of employee ID number 3. So now that we know how to add and modify our data, we can finally look at our summary sheet. So in order to do that, let's go back to survey and let's select the summary sheet. The summary sheet is divided into 2 sections. There is the summary of data and the calculation section, which is this portion. The summary of the monthly data is the summarized data of all the employees for a particular month. So it is the 1st of August. If you would like to look at the September month, all you would have to do is change the date to September and select run. So I've already run this process for August. What happens in this sheet is you would extract all the data for the entire month and it would summarize it for each particular employee. So you would have his actual days he came to work, and that is broken up into each week, the total hours, extra hours, overtime, etc. The second portion of the sheet is the calculation sheet. This portion is where you will what you will be using to calculate your employee's net salary. So from the left hand side, I have extracted the basic salary, allowance and fuel allowance. And on my right hand side calculation, I have put in formulas to calculate his hourly rate, his overtime, his net pay, gross salary, taxes, etc. So these calculations can be changed any way you please, and if you want to add in more columns, you are free to do so. Once you have put in formulas for each of these sections, you can simply drag down and these are all calculations which are basic sum features. The second part of this sheet is the ATT summary sheet. If you select the ATT summary sheet, you can see the individual attendance of each individual employee. So you can see how each individual employee has come into work. He has come in as a full day, or if he has come in as a half day. You can see it from the sheet. There is a color guide available at the top over here to make it easier to sort of follow. So the green shows the employee has taken leave, the red defines a no pay leave has been given, the blue is for off days, and the yellow is for a holiday. Unlike the employee summary sheet, the color orange is not available, so just keep that in mind. So we have gone through the entire workbook and we know how to run the system now, and the available calculations you would need to do to extract the net salary of an employee. Let's show how we can add in new users to the system and modify the times, etc. So in order to modify the times, you can click here and change the time in from 7 a.m. To whichever time you would want to put in, and click OK. And if you want to add in a new user, we can first do that by clicking switch user and selecting add new user. Let's give him a new username and let's give him access to 2 worksheets. Click OK. The new user has been created, and let's log in. As you can see, the new user has access to the 2 worksheets we have given below, and he is not able to modify the times or any user details. So let's switch back to the administrator and log in, and let's modify the user details, and we can do that by selecting the new username and maybe giving him access to the employee database. Click OK, close the form and switch user. As you can see, the new user has now access to the employee database. So I guess that's about it. I hope you will all find this workbook useful, and please subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Take care.